Hello, everyone. We're going to get started here. Thank you for joining us, and welcome to the 2019 Sloan Sports Analytics Conference Competitive Advantage Talks presented by Ticketmaster. My name is JB Kalin, and I'm a first-year MBA student at Sloan, and it's my pleasure to introduce our presentation, Success by the Numbers, Using Data to Impact Performance. Please join me in welcoming our speaker, Darcy Norman, Performance Coach, U.S. Men's National Soccer Team. Welcome, Darcy.
Thank you. All right, so I'm going to give you a 20-minute chat about my journey and where I've gone in the last approximately 20 years. I started out with a company called Exos, formerly Athletes Performance, and there we had the ability to just build athletes. We had this great environment. We did all the little things right to just build them up, rehab them, get them going, optimizing their performance. Then I had the opportunity to go to Europe and join a club, FC Bayern Munich, and try and take that kind of supply chain system of building athletes and then soccerifying it, putting it in a place where you had to adapt the language, the information, tweak things a little bit to the demands to then execute on what it is we're trying to do. After Bayern Munich, I ended up joining the German national team. And from there, I got a better appreciation. I didn't realize it at the time. Now in reflection, I realize it a lot more, that it was putting that supply chain process, which is what Germany does very well, all the pieces logistically organized, and I'll give you some examples, to then apply it. What I didn't appreciate was the interactions between the parts. I just saw the building and the planning and all the things that made it go, but I didn't see the nuancy pieces that helped with the decision making to execute on the little things that helped in the success of winning a World Cup in 2014. And just to be fair, it's easy to stand up and say I was a part of that team, but I was also a part of the team that failed miserably, following a very similar path with the same staff, essentially, obviously a few different players, in 2018. So the fragility of being a part of both of those was very impactful. And then I had the opportunity to go to Rome, to a club that was kind of in a rebuilding stage, a new owner. Everyone was trying to pick up pieces and move this club and take it to a high level. And so I started trying to put in those same process pieces to get and build systems, build structures to help organize it. And everyone in the different departments were trying to do the same thing. And we didn't really have a strong overall guiding light because everyone was kind of drinking from the same fire hose in a very difficult or challenging culture for myself to make things happen. And the language was obviously also a challenge. So I just recently got home this summer after 3 years in Rome and started with Kitman Labs, which is a data and athlete optimization systems company. And the reason I joined those guys because they were doing some phenomenal analytic pieces that really helped, and the deeper questions that we had that helped with the interactions between the pieces. And then got the opportunity to join U.S. Men's Soccer with Greg Berhalter's staff, and definitely very optimistic in where U.S. soccer is going in the future and what we're trying to do there, and obviously trying to take some of this learning along the way. So in the first part of this, someone asked when we won the World Cup, they said, hey, what do you think was the reason? And so we were talking through it, and they said, it sounds like you supply chain managed human performance. And it was really interesting. I had no idea what supply chain management meant. I'm a sports guy, PT, strength coach, athletic trainer. Didn't really have any experience in the business side of things. So I went and started looking it up. And I was like, man, you're totally right. Like, we had all the pieces and we put it together. And again, I'll show you some examples. And then when we got to Rome, like I said, I was drinking from a fire hose, trying to take in all this information, put all these systems, trying to get staffs working together that came from different backgrounds. And I did a lot of reading. And I finally kind of came across this, which gave me a great framework, which was more around complex systems thinking. So the supply chain management was more about the parts, and the complex systems thinking was more around the interactions between the parts, the little pieces that make it different, that makes it really hard to put a number on. And so I'll kind of walk you through how that all makes sense. But I've used a lot of business models to help me in sports to get my head wrapped around all these moving pieces. Because typically in sports, it's very emotional. All the decisions are very emotional, and you have to stand back at times to really kind of wrap your head around it. So a great book that I'm sure a lot of you read, Thinking Fast and Slow. There was an article, a summary article by Aaron Kutz that came out that talked about thinking fast and slow as it relates to sport, and taking that there is two sides to your brain, right? The ones that are making gut decisions, and then there's other times you have to stand back and take an assessment of what's going on to really understand the big picture. And so the complex system side is more this reductionist approach, quick decisions. And I think as a data and analytics group, that's where we're at today. Like those are the basic, like here's what we did today, here's what we did this week, here's what we did this month, here's what we did this year. But it really doesn't give you any hard information to make and help you do quick decisions in the environment on the go. It's giving you kind of oversight information that you can then, in retrospect, plan from, but it's not helping you in the heat of the battle. And so we need more around this understanding the complex system side and using analytics information to help us on this side. So when we are moving along and a light comes on or a number comes up, we have better information to make better decisions, to have better conversations to help with those interactions between the parts. And so I think I've kind of gone full circle on this. And looking at this dashboard when I was preparing this presentation, this is, it's a sight of beauty because it is the summary of this presentation. On the left is the supply chain management. It's all the information about your car, your system, the thing that you're operating. So if the oil light comes on, I got to stop and put oil in there. If the revs go too high, my engine's going to heat up, same thing. So it's just telling you about that moment that you know about your car. It's the other side that is more around the complex systems piece. It's what's telling you where you're at and how you're operating within the environment that you're moving, right? Because what you don't see in this picture is the speed limit sign. What you don't see in this picture is the cars ripping past you, the guy honking behind you, all these other things where if you just look at this dashboard, you look down and say, oh yeah, I'm going 60K an hour. It's exactly where I need to be. I'm totally happy. This guy can honk all he wants. I'm out. I'm just going to focus on enjoying my trip. I see the weather. It's going to be nice as I'm traveling, when I get there, and then my distance to empty, right? Do I want to pull over now, get a sandwich, go to the bathroom, or am I going to rock this out all the way, get there, and start enjoying my vacation? And so I think this is the place that we need to get to. The hard part is what you don't see on the right, like I said, is the environment and the context. So when we have this data, we need the context around it to have those better conversations. So the supply chain management, right? It's just building parts. You get data, how are we doing, refine it, keep going, efficiency, all those kind of pieces. How it goes into more sports scenario, right? And this is just taken from the Council of Supply Chain Management, the 6 categories. We plan, we source, we make, we have returns, we deliver, and we have sales. So in sports, the planning is just trying to plan and have the information around a plan as efficient as possible. Then we have to source our materials. In sports, it's human capital, right? So what kind of modeling and things are we doing there to make sure we're getting the right guys? And then, again, we still have to put them in an environment that's totally chaotic, and we don't know how they're going to react to that environment. They may look great on paper, but you put them in Italy where they don't understand the language and have some other, concerns around there away from family, and all of a sudden they struggle. Then you have to make the product. I think this is where we do a really good job, right? We know how to improve performance. Yeah, I wouldn't say it's straightforward, but it's pretty routine, right? You eat well, you train, you recover, you repeat, you keep going. You tweak things along the way. But again, it's the environment and the stress environment around it that you have to engage with. And then there's a returns policy, right? If your product breaks, how quickly can you get it back into your supply chain, get it back out to your customer so that it can be a productive part of your sales? Then there's the delivery. How do you get your product, your team, in a clean way to wherever it is you're competing? So that needs to be efficient so you, again, eliminate the stress. Then there's the sales, right? That's for us in sports, it's just winning games. So a simple example from a tournament, right? This is a tournament calendar, World Cup calendar from 2014. So what we did was we boiled it all down in 15-minute increments, summarized the data like we do in our normal day-to-day, week-to-week reports to get some information that we find trends, very simple things that we can then plan against, right? We see these consistent routine things happening over and over again that allow us to then optimize the best plan for, hey, what's the best 4-day game week? What components do we need to go into that? Then we can go execute on it. How did it go? We can refine it and keep tweaking it down to improve that product. And then 3-day game weeks, same thing. What do we have to adjust and balance to make that happen? So on the complex systems side, this is where it gets really complicated and where I would ask the people that are doing the numbers, doing the reporting on stuff, if they're thinking more about this, because this is the stuff that really has impact, right? And complex systems thinking is around these 5 categories. I took it from a book called The Fifth Discipline written by Peter Senge. And so there's understanding that it is a system, like you're part of a greater environment. And that environment is constantly changing. Do you have the information to execute on that environment? Then there's the personal mastery. Who's that person, that one part, and how do they contribute to the greater good of what the overall goal is, which is, again, I'll come back to, and very important. Then there's the shared vision, right? That common goal. There was a talk this morning, and they were talking in Barcelona. They said, hey, it's not a good idea, it's not a bad idea, but it's our idea. They had a very clear end in sight of where they're trying to get to, and then everything they do is to refine and execute on that idea. And they don't get stuck with all the honking in the back, this guy speeding past you, right? They're sticking to their lane, they know where they're going, and they're constantly refining that process. And as you see in the great teams around the world, is that they have these consistent processes and they have their ideas. So whether it's the Patriots, whether it's Barcelona, whether it's the Bayern Munichs, the Juventuses, they're very clear in where they're going, what they're doing, and how they're doing it, and they're sticking to their lane, and they're using information to upgrade that final piece. And what it does is it doesn't necessarily guarantee you that you're going to win every time, but consistently you're always going to be in the running, right? Then there's the mental models, and this is the important part about sports, because mental models are all around heuristics and biases. And so this is the piece where we need information to have those conversations, to relieve those biases that we have in our head to execute on what it is we're trying to do. And then obviously refining that process so your learning curve gets steep. As we say in Germany, go steil. So the asking questions isn't new, right? But finding the answers on how to get them is. So typically when we go in the data, we have an idea, we have a bias in our head, then we go to look for information to support our idea so we can go put it in front of whoever it is we're trying to convince to get them to do what we're trying to do. So we have a bias in the data already. So we need to look at opportunities for unbiased information, ways that are outcome driven, looking at the end in mind and not necessarily what's right in front of us at the moment, because I think we do that already. And what's usually in front of us is more on a univariate side, a one-to-one relationship, right? The oil light goes on, okay, I stop and put oil in it. But then there's all these other complex factors that on a multivariate scenario is very important. And then we can dial it down to the team, down to the position group, and then down to the individual athlete. Because at the end of the day, on the personal mastery side, that's what we're trying to build up. And so when we look at the more of a multivariate analysis in an unbiased way, we need the ability to aggregate all this data. And we don't know necessarily, are we looking at a mix, or a max, a min, a sum, a standard deviation, z-scores, acute chronics? We have a paper up today with Luke Bourne and Patrick around kind of dispelling some of the myths of the energy that we're putting into acute chronic ratios and what that is about. And so we need more models. And then timelines. Is it a 1-day average, 2-day average, 3, 4, 7, 21? Who knows? We don't know. We're guessing, right? So we need ways and models to be able to run that so it kind of sees the statistical relationships of what we're trying to get to without us necessarily putting it in. then being able to sweep the information, look for statistical relevance, and continue to go through the systems until we get down to some more meaningful information around risk mitigation so we can have better information to upgrade our situation. Then we can put that back into the information, into alerts, to be able to give us those times, right? Like, oh, there's a speed limit sign, 30 kilometers an hour, I better slow down, right? Or you know what, screw it, I'm in a hurry, I'm gonna go, I'm taking the risk. So these are some of the kind of the more statistical examples of how the relationships around the multifactorial scenarios. So this was a EPL team with ankle injuries over a season, right? For the amount of exposures they had, not a lot of opportunity for ankle injuries. The key thing here was it was all their highest producers that were getting them. So it doesn't necessarily a one size fits all, but it's important to note if your higher producers, the guys that are putting the ball in the net, are having these issues. And so then once you understand the information and the numbers, then you can start to see where you need to intervene. So as this is happening in this daisy chain of events, all we see with this is that, hey, if we just program a little better, right, and we have the decelerations and accelerations in our planning and we're alerting to that, then that negates all the statistical relationship further on, and that ends up helping our risk mitigation. And so other examples more around baseball and screening and using data to kind of build that culture of information. So in this particular example, a baseball team, Major League Baseball team, was doing screening with their athletes around shoulder or pitchers around internal, external rotation. And what they found was the more they screened, they were alerted when their numbers were low. So then they could put workflows in place to take those guys, address them, treat them, and then they could keep training instead of saying, oh, your range of motion is low. Like, whoa, like let's just hold off today, let's check it tomorrow and we'll see if it's any better. We could now put pieces in place and workflows and improve those workflows to actually act on the information, again, like the road sign and the speedometer, to help us make better decisions so we can keep moving forward. And what they found was the more they screened, the less injuries they had. Totally makes sense, right? You have better information, communication on how the athletes are doing, and that allows you to have typically healthier athletes. And then as a result of having healthier athletes, they were able to maintain consistent training, which then gave them better opportunities to reach their goal of getting to the major leagues. And so now you have real information to sit down with a player to say, this is why we're doing this. As you screen, we keep better tabs on you, then you're able to train better, have a less risk of injury, and that'll get you towards your goal. So in the complex system things, the value proposition has to be good, excuse me, good for everybody. So how can we apply this in these pieces, right? It's not an easy thing because it takes time. It's that slow side. We got to back down, but there are tools now that are helping to make that happen in a quicker, more robust way. So again, more examples of, this is a professional soccer example, so looking at congestion, fixtures, and injuries. That obviously the more games you have in a shorter period of time, the higher rate of injury. Again, not rocket science, but now I have a hard number to put stick in the sand to have a more meaningful conversation with management coaches and deciding, hey, it's our star player, our highest producer. Do we want to take that risk or not? Yeah, we have to take that risk. Okay, if they get injured, hey, look, it was a risk, we had to take it, but now the emotion is gone out of it and we can continue to move forward. And then on top of that, we can use that information, like I said earlier, to improve workflows, to be able to put things in place and then measure against, does our risk mitigation drop? So in this particular example, with that schedule congestion, they had a higher risk of injury because they had this increased change of velocity too early on and too repetitively. So once they were able to understand that, they were able to plan better, do it in smaller doses in preparation for the events. Their injuries went down from 27 times more risk down to 2.5. And then the same thing on the sleep hours when with all their travel and pieces, all the travel pieces related around to their schedule congestion. it gave them a harder time to do all the recovery pieces. So once they saw the risk involved, they were able to say as an organization, hey, let's hold the phone. Maybe we should stay in town another day, allow more sleep opportunities for people. Maybe let's put a few more things in place to make sure recovery and recovery management is in place. And again, they did that and the risk drops. So their workflows continue to improve, but everyone has the information to have those conversations. And then also, hey, who do we have as a group within our team? So various cohorts in there. So for players with less time in preseason, they were 2 times more at risk. Again, they don't have the preparation phase. They use games to get in shape. The training and the exposure isn't what they thought. And so that risk goes up. For players on international duty, 3.5 times more, because they, again, come back even later. They get pushed into the scenario, and then the risk goes up. And again, it is what it is, but you now have information to have better conversations. For less fit players relative to more fit, and then for players over 27 or older players. And that it was the statistics that found that the 27 was the issue, right? But we're always saying, oh, at 30. Like, what happens at 30? Some guys at 30, some guys maybe at 27, depend on what they bring to the table. And this is where, again, you can put more investment in going down to the individual phenotyping of those particular athletes. So this is kind of more of a baseball dashboard to that gauge, right? So shoulder internal rotation, if their reduction of 1 standard deviation decreases, the risk of injury goes up 2 times. So again, I can put an alert in the system. So when they're screening, okay, it comes up, let's do something about it. Now we can keep moving forward. Games pitched in the last 7 days, if there were 5 or more, the increased risk went up 8 times. So again, I can manage that. I understand the information, and I can have better conversations with the people around it. Number of bullpens in the last 5 days, 2+. The shoulder range, 5 times increase. Workload in the last 3 days, if it went up or doubled, then obviously the risk goes up. And again, it's all stuff that makes sense, but now you have real numbers that have a direct impact on decision making in your day-to-day. So in summary, it starts with that mission, vision, and values of the organization. If that is not clear, and again, being a PT strength coach, I didn't really appreciate it. I was like, that stuff's nonsense. But then when I got into more chaotic environments where I saw all the interactions and where they went wrong, that piece ends up being the guiding light for your organization. From there, you can then decide, okay, what do we need to go collect? Let's collect that information, let's analyze it, let's report on it, set up alerts if it's more the multifactorial stuff, so it's giving us things in real time. Is that helping us, right? Because as we make a decision, it creates a new set of circumstances, kind of like the choose your own adventure. So it's constantly iterating. And so you have to be able to, and the system has to be able to iterate with it. And so then you decide at the end, okay, are we getting somewhere? Is it better? Is it worse? Let's keep going on this. We're going to put that one away. Maybe we learned it. It helped us through this one piece, but now we're on to other things. All right, that's it. Thank you guys very much. Questions?
I have a question about how you handled the psychological aspect of this, because you're dealing with human beings, you're dealing with multiple cultures, and the same data packaged the same way to 2 different people can give you 2 different results. So how did you manage that?
Yeah, I mean, great question. That's the mental model part of complex systems, right? There's that famous graphic of the 6, like kind of the digital 6, and on one guy he's yelling, oh, it's a 6, and the other guy's yelling, no, it's a 9. And so it's important that you have now something, like I keep saying, that stick in the sand to have a more meaningful conversation. Then you can understand what the restrictions are of that person around what you're looking at, right? So it's like, oh, you think it's a 6? Hey, come on over here. Guess what? I see it from a 9. Oh, that's great. Awesome. Okay, come on over here. Yeah, I see it as a 6. Oh, now I know what you're talking about. Okay, great. Now we understand each other and we can move on and have a better conversation. That's where those value propositions have to be aligned to then get them moving forward. So it's all about the conversations, the interactions between the parts, and not necessarily the parts themselves. And I think that's where we've done a disservice, is we're treating this like a bunch of parts and improving the parts. But you can take a car, you can take all the best car parts, and I get this analogy from a phenomenal guy, Russ Enkoff, if you've ever seen any of his videos, and he talks about that if you take the best car parts of all the different cars in the world, put them on the floor, you will not have an operational car because the interactions between the parts aren't perfect. So you can have less parts, but yet a higher performing car because the interaction between them is good. And I think that's where the juice is in the scenario. The hard part is getting a whole organization to get on that boat, to put an oar in the water and row that way. Good question.
On many other domains than sport, we are using the concept of the digital twin, where we have a digital twin, where we have an integrated representation of the complex system, because there are a lot of interaction that we don't always understand or see from outside. Do you see the same applying to the athlete, to look at the athlete holistically with all the data points that are capturing some aspect of the performance of the athlete to build an integrated model that then can be used to derive coaching strategy?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I think the hard part is you might have 1 or 2 or 3 people in an organization doing that, but you don't have the whole organization looking that way. So it breaks at various points. So you can't complete that model. And I think that's where you get the Barcelonas, that they have their way, their idea, and as a group, they're all moving in that direction. And I think another piece to that is the whole information side, right? Like we've had teams that said, hey, you know what, we're collecting all this information, but it's not really, we don't change our decisions. So why in the hell are we collecting it? Good point. Like it takes energy, and it takes people, and it takes manpower. But now, if you kind of understand this piece and you go step by step, it becomes a feed-forward loop. Then it's like, oh, hey, now if we put it in the right structure and framework, now it's like, well, let's go get that piece of data, because if we have that, now we can answer some of these other questions, or we can at least ask the questions and see what the data tells us.
I'm sorry, that's all the time we have today, guys. We have another talk in a few minutes. Thanks so much, Darcy.
All right. Thanks, guys.